Ecclesiastes, the 9th chapter. Ecclesiastes, the 9th chapter. We're in a section that started really in verse 14. We're all the way in verse 16, but verse 16 is the conclusion of the two previous verses. And I want us to read those verses and just barely talk about them for just a minute. Solomon writes this: "There was a little city, and few men within it. And there came a great king against it, and besieged it, and built great bulwarks against it. Now there was found in it a poor wise man, and he by wisdom delivered the city. Yet no man remembered that same poor man." And we were making the point that Solomon is using this little story as an illustration. Okay? True or false? Strong people love to impose on weak people. Oh yes, it doesn't matter whether you're just in society or if you're talking about nations. The strong always go against who? They always go against the weak, don't they? And so Solomon uses this concept to give an illustration. He says there's this strong, powerful king. He comes against a city and he sets up a bulwark and he wants to overthrow the city. But who is it that delivers the city? A poor, be careful, poor wise man delivers the city, doesn't he? And even after the city is delivered, though, what happens to the poor wise man? He isn't remembered, is he? He's forgotten by those individuals. The Bible says, "And he by his wisdom delivered the city, yet no man remembered that same poor wise man." Now Solomon, after that story, makes his point in verse 16 of Ecclesiastes 9. "Then said I, wisdom is better than strength. Nevertheless, the poor man's wisdom is despised, and his words are not heard." Man, there's three things that Solomon notes in that verse. The first is this: wisdom is better than what? Wisdom is better than strength. Now, nations thrive on strength and power, do they not? And notice point A there: strength often operates without any thought whatsoever. It believes that power alone can do what? Can dominate, can it? Power alone is all that an individual needs. Many people won't ever believe this, but when I played football in high school, I was an offensive guard. Ain't that a hoot? That means I'm a lineman. Okay? An offensive guard on the line. And, you know, when you look across at defensive people, defensive tackles, they were about two of me. Okay? Big old guys. You're talking about 250, 300 pounds sitting across from me. And you wonder, how in the world can a little bitty guy, and there was two of us, we were both guards, we were both about the same size, how can little bitty guys overpower big guys? Okay? Because strength dominates, does it not? Strength is what wins. Not necessarily. That's not what Solomon says. He says what? Wisdom is better than strength. There were techniques that our coach gave us, and I could maneuver a 200 or 300 pound man just about any way I wanted him to go. You know that? And if I am a pulling guard, that means that my big defensive tackle blocks down. I pull out of the hole, and guess what I get to do? I get to blindside somebody just as hard as I can blindside him. He has no clue I'm even coming. Pow! Got him. I may be little, but guess what I can do? Knock you off your feet if you're not looking at me. Okay? And so there's techniques that you can use to overpower even the strongest and the most powerful individuals, folks. Power alone does not necessarily mean that you're going to win. Wisdom can outwit strength at times. Notice what I put down. Wisdom thinks, plans, calculates, and has the ability to be what? Flexible. And that's a whole lot different than just going at something with what? Sheer strength. Okay? It's a whole lot different than sheer strength. Point number 2. The poor man's wisdom is what? Is despised. That's what he says. Nevertheless, the poor man's wisdom is despised. And I wrote this: the poor man's wisdom is despised because of several misconceptions. And one of the misconceptions is this, that if someone is poor, he can't be what? He can't be wise. Man, isn't that something? But isn't that kind of the, take for instance people in positions of power today. We have what's known as the flyover country in the United States. That's the middle of the country, okay? It's where all your agricultural people are. It's where just your hard, plain workers are. And guess what people do on the coasts? They're the rich, they're the wealthy, they're the powerful, they're the techies. They're all these people that, they're in their little groups and stuff. And they look at hard-working people as just useless, okay? They're not very smart. They're dumb, they're rednecks, they're hicks, they're country, they don't know how to talk English. They didn't go to Harvard and Yale and Princeton. Okay, they just went to what? Memphis State, Ole Miss, Tennessee, just, I'll put it in there for you, Alabama, Florida, we'll get them in there. But they just look like that. We're not smart at all. It's unbelievable. Guys, just because you may not be in a position of power, just because you may not have the most wealthy job that's available, just because you may not be a person of public influence, doesn't mean that you're an ignorant person. I put an example in there. Listen to this statement. Philip findeth Nathanael and saith unto him, We have found him of whom Moses in the law and the prophets did write, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph. And Nathanael said unto him, Can there come any good thing out of Nazareth? Philip saith unto him, Come and see. He had a wrong perception of what? As far as I know, there's only come one thing out of Nazareth, and guess what that is? The Christ. And that alone is enough to put it on the mark, put its mark on the planet, is it not? Isn't that amazing? He had a wrong conception of that. There's never been anything good come out of what? Out of Nazareth. Everybody knew about Nazareth. Little bitty, sleepy town. No sports figures, no world leaders, right? No powerful individuals, no wealthy people. Nobody like that has ever come out of Nazareth, and now you're wanting me to go see who? Jesus of Nazareth. Unbelievable, is it not? Unbelievable. What individuals fail to remember is that wisdom is wisdom regardless of who possesses it. Wow. Wisdom can reside in the young, the obscure, the insignificant, the poor, and the, watch this, uneducated. Isn't that something? Uneducated people can be what? Wise people. Very wise people. Sometimes those thought to be less wise are the what? Are the wise men. Sometimes elderly people don't want to hear from young people because elderly people think what? We're the wise people. Y'all are the dummies. Y'all need to sit down because we're wise. Age alone doesn't make you wise. You know that? Age alone doesn't make you wise. Listen to what David says in Psalm 119, 99 and 100. I have more understanding than what? All my teachers, for thy testimonies are my meditation. Now listen to this next statement. I understand more than the ancients. Because what? I keep thy precepts. Folks, this is the most wisdom that anybody could ever put in their minds. You know this? Because this wisdom doesn't come from where? Doesn't come from man. This wisdom comes from above. And David said, I have more understanding than all my teachers. Because he knew what? He knew the book. Okay, now he's talking about the Old Testament book, isn't he? And then he says, I have more wisdom than all the ancients. Because I what? Keep thy precepts. You can be old and think you're smart and be as dumb as a rock if you don't know the book. You know that? And a wise man can be young and wiser than the old person because he knows the book. Okay? You have to be very, very careful. Here's a wise man that was despised in this city. And the last point that he made is this. His words are what? His words are not heard. They're not heard. Just think about that. Here's a wise man. He has a lot to say, a lot to contribute. And guess what? He isn't heard. Because a man is poor, he is often shuffled off to the side and put in a corner. Isn't he? If he appears to be wiser than the wise, he makes them look like a fool, and they don't want that. Right? If I'm smart, and I know I'm smart, and I know that I'm smarter than you, but you seem to be smarter than I am, guess who I don't want around? You. Because you make me look what? Unsmart. People don't like that. All of us have probably experienced a situation where the advice of an employee on the job is rejected for the knowledge of a new college graduate who's just taken the position of manager. Right? He's the what? He's the wise man. He just graduated with a degree in engineering, and he knows exactly how all this is supposed to operate. And the old boy on the job laughs, doesn't he? And just laughs. He tries to say something to the manager, and the manager says what? I'm the manager. I have a PhD. I know what I'm talking about. This will work. And guess what? It doesn't work. An old guy that's on the job, been on the job for 40 years, never went to school, but he's learned the job. He knows exactly how to do it, doesn't he? Knows how to solve the problem. Knows how to deal with the situation better than anybody else. But guess what? We don't want to hear him because he's just what? He's just an hourly employee. Right? Don't care how long he's been on the job. Anybody ever seen the movie Runaway? Denzel Washington. It's about a runaway train. If y'all haven't seen that, you need to watch that. It begins with Denzel Washington. He's been on the job for like 30, 35 years as an engineer on the railroad. And this new guy comes along, and he is kin to one of the uppity guys in the company. Okay, and everybody knows that. And so at first there's this unbelievable tension between Denzel and this other guy. They're just at odds with one another. Denzel looks at him like he's a rookie, and he is. And the rookie looks at Denzel like, hey, you don't need to be treating me like this just because I'm, brand new and just because maybe I was hired because I know somebody in the company or somebody. I know what I'm doing. And that's the kind of situation that we have here going on. And folks, we need to respect wisdom regardless of where that wisdom comes from, do we not? That's the point that Solomon's trying to make to us. Questions, comments, anybody? Nobody. All right. Ecclesiastes 9:7. The words of wise men are heard in quiet, more than the cry of him that ruleth among fools. Man. Solomon notes that true wisdom is often found in quiet places and not among the masses. That's interesting. The old widow or widow who lives alone after having experienced years of living. Is there a lot of wisdom in that? Yeah. And guess what? The widow or widower is not vocal. They're not loud. Their views are not displayed all over public television. If you're going to learn their wisdom and have some of their understanding, you're going to have to do it where? Probably in their living room, aren't you? And oftentimes, in order to get that wisdom, you're going to have to pick that wisdom out, aren't you? Because they don't just voluntarily give that wisdom. It's amazing. We made mention of this, the worker who is on the front line instead of being in the executive office. The person who lives in a rural area and makes many decisions based on just old common sense. The mother who knows the needs of her children and her family. It's amazing to me that we live in a society today where people who aren't parents think they know better how to treat my children than I do as a parent. Where did you learn that? You don't even know who my kid is. You may know his name and you may know his social security number, and other than that, you know about zero about him, but you are telling me you know better to raise him than I do? Folks, that don't happen. And that is not God's way. And we need to reject that kind of stuff in our society. It's scary when individuals try to take over our homes the way some are trying to do. We know better than who? Than Mama and Daddy. And you know, Mom and Daddy come in and they're just regular old Joes, aren't they? You know, nothing fancy about them. Nothing special. Don't have their hair all done up. May not wear makeup all the time. May be a little bit overweight. Right? They don't have time for all that primping and proppering stuff. They just come in as regular people. But guess what? They know their kids, and they know who their kids are, and they know what their kids need, don't they? But that's not the way the world sees it sometime. One would think that the person who is in charge is a wise man, would you not? Wouldn't you think that? Surely the one in charge is a wise person. His proclamations to his followers should come from knowledge and understanding and years of experience. He ought to be the wisest person among us. But that's not always the case, is it? Do we always pick the wisest and sharpest and smartest people to be leaders? How do we get them? Well, I wrote down a list of stuff. Some become rulers by lineage. Don't they? Isn't that the way monarchs often took the throne? Maybe he had a wonderful, wonderful leader as a king. And then he has a son who's as dumb as a rock. But yet everybody thought what? The son is supposed to step right in behind the father. One of the reasons that Israel wanted a king is because of, do you know whose sons? Nobody knows. Because of Samuel's sons. Okay? Samuel was a wonderful person. He was a wonderful judge. Never took bribes. Never did wrong. Never tried to take advantage of the people. Never misjudged cases. He was a wonderful judge of Israel. But his sons, the Bible says, made themselves vile. And they were wicked individuals, and individuals didn't want them to become what? The next judge. And therefore they desired a what? They desired a king. Okay? Some become rulers by overthrowing the throne of another, don't they? I don't know about you. I don't know if I want that kind of a ruler. Do you? How do I know you're a good ruler just because you can overthrow this man? You may be the most wicked individual in the world. And just because you have the power to take the position doesn't make you anything. Some become rulers by means of deception, don't they? By deceiving the people. Remember Absalom? Did he deceive the people? Oh yeah. Absalom was a wicked son of David. Wicked as he could be. Okay? But he went to the city gates. Everybody who walked in, he just introduced himself. He probably looked pretty. Probably smelled good. And he would tell them, you know, if I were the one ruling this nation, I would rule this nation totally different than the way my daddy's doing it. And guess what they did? They latched on to that, did they not? And they even made him king. Unbelievable. Some become rulers because the people simply reject another, don't they? We don't want this one, so we'll take this one, but this one ain't any good either. We always say something like this, it's the lesser of what? See there? Y'all have all lived through that. Okay? Sometimes when you're making a choice about who to vote for, it's just the lesser of what? Two evils. You push a button, close your eyes, push a button, you know, and whoever's there is there. It's sad, isn't it? Some become rulers by playing the game with others who are also in charge, don't they? Sometimes we say it like this, it's all about who you know, right? Who you know. And if you know the right people, you can get in the right places, can't you? If you do the right things, you can get in the right places. But if you don't play the game, you're out. It's unbelievable. Being ambitious and being determined and being ruthless does not mean the ruler is a wise person, folks. Okay? Just because you're in line for the position doesn't mean that you're a wise person. And that's what Solomon is talking about here. The words of wise men are heard in quiet, more than the cry of him that ruleth among fools. Notice that last point there. There are some rulers who cry out, but they do so among who? Among fools. Now that's a scary thought. I don't know about you. I don't ever want to be a foolish follower. Do you? Never want to be a foolish follower. And yet the Bible talks about them, right? The cry of him that ruleth among fools. Foolish followers of that ruler. Wow. Some rulers have their yes men who will never go against them, right? We put it like this. They know who butters their bread, right? I've got a wealthy, cushy position. If I go against my leader, even if he's wrong, and I should go against him, I'll lose my what? I'll lose my job. I'll lose my job. They have their friends who are benefiting from them and would never cut off the hand that feeds them. There you go. Sad, isn't it? They have their followers who are enamored by them, aren't they? And they just follow them how? Blindly, don't they? You know, we shouldn't let looks and we shouldn't let, a personality deceive us, folks. Okay? Looks and personality do not mandate the ideology of the individual. Okay? It should not be the reason we choose someone to be a leader. Point number 4, they have their followers who are committed to party and ideology and would never turn against those things. That's a tough one, isn't it? This is what I am, this is who I am, this is what I've always been, this is what my family's always been, and guess what? I will never change. That's a toughie. Individuals who fall into these groups often allow foolish men and women to remain in power to their detriment. Rulers of who? Foolish masses. Foolish people. Wow. It's amazing how much wisdom Solomon has about what? About leadership. And yet, was Solomon somewhat unwise? Yeah? Isn't that amazing? Here's the wisest man on the earth, a man endowed with divine knowledge. He gets to his old age, and guess what he becomes? Ignorant, doesn't he? He just becomes ignorant. He marries a bunch of women from foreign countries, strange women, the Bible says. And what do? Yeah, they turn his heart. Turn over to Deuteronomy for just a minute. This is interesting. Deuteronomy, the 17th chapter. Glenn mentioned that we're studying the book of Deuteronomy in our daily devotions on the website. I want you to listen to something that God says about the nation in Deuteronomy 17. Let's see. Got to find it. Well, not terrible. Here it is. Start at verse 14. Verse 14. When thou art come into the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. Now let me ask you something. When was Deuteronomy written? Does anybody know? Well, who wrote it? Okay, good. Moses. So if Moses wrote it, he had to write it before he died. Is that true? Well, I sure hope so. Okay. He had to have written it before he died. Where did he die? Okay. Died where, Jim? Okay. It wasn't Mount Nebo. What was it? Anyway, he died on this side of the Jordan River. Okay, the children of Israel have not even entered into what? The promised land. Okay? They haven't crossed over the Jordan to enter into the promised land. They haven't conquered it whatsoever. And here Moses is speaking to the children of Israel about the future. When thou art come unto the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee, thou shalt possess it, and shalt dwell therein. And thou shalt say, I will set a king over me, like as all the nations that are about me. Wow. God already knew what? This is almost 500, 600 years before it happens. And God already predicts what? You'll want a king one of these days. Unbelievable, isn't it? Now listen to what he says. And thou shalt in any wise set him king over thee. Now listen to what he says. Whom the Lord thy God shall choose. This ain't going to be your king. It's going to be what? My king. And then he says this. One from among thy brethren shalt thou set king over thee. Thou mayest not set a stranger over thee, which is not thy brother. Had to be a what? Had to be a Jew. Couldn't be a stranger. Couldn't be somebody from a foreign land, God says. God knew that there's going to be problems down the line way before Israel became a nation even, and it's just sad. But Solomon, if you continue to read, he warns about he tells what this king's not to do. And one of the things he says is this, thou shalt not multiply wives unto himself, lest they do what? Lest they lead his heart astray. Okay? And that's exactly what happened to Solomon. Okay? Here God predicts it, and it happens. The wisest man on the earth was led astray. Questions, comments? Anybody? Well, y'all are a quiet bunch today. Ecclesiastes 9:18. He's made a similar statement to this before, but very interesting. Wisdom is better than weapons of war. But one sinner does what? Destroyeth much good. Man. In verse 16, Solomon had said wisdom is better than what? Strength. Now he says what? Wisdom is better than weapons, folks. How is strength manifested among nations? Weapons. One of the scary things that our world is now getting shaky on again is the threat of nuclear war, is it not? We went through that back in the 70s and the 80s. You know, every time you turned around, somebody was scared. Somebody's going to shoot a nuclear missile at somebody, and that's going to set off nuclear war. And we're right back in the middle of that kind of thinking again today. Because nuclear power is what? It's strong, isn't it? And deadly, absolutely. And so many times that's the way we think, don't we? We think, you know, whoever has the most might, whoever has the most weapons, whoever has the most powerful weapons is what? The strongest in the world. And so everybody tries to build up their military might. Who has the largest army and most powerful army in the world today? China. Isn't that something? China. And they continue to build up their military. Because with China, might makes right, don't they? China would love to rule the world. You know it? They would love to rule the world. And it's scary. If we're not careful, they will. Absolutely. But watch this next statement. Good decisions made by those in leadership can nullify the threats of the enemy, can't they? Doesn't matter how many weapons you have, if a leader is smart, if a leader is wise, he just might be able to nullify any threats of the enemy, even of his most powerful weapons. The weapons may not be able to fire at all, right? Secondly, they may fire in the wrong direction. They may fire upon their own people, mightn't they? All because one leader is wise. He doesn't have all the strength. He doesn't have all the power, but he has what? Wisdom. Has anybody ever heard of the fall of the city of Troy? I heard 2 yips. Okay. The fall of the city of Troy. Okay. Very interesting battle. Most of us, if I said it this way, have any of you ever heard of the Trojan horse? See, you did know more than you thought you knew. Okay. We've all heard about the Trojan horse, right? Unbelievable. Notice point 1 there. The city of Troy was a well-fortified city, folks. Listen to how it's described by one writer. The city itself is described as sitting on a steep hill, protected by enormous sloping stone walls, rectangular towers, and massive gates whose wooden doors can be bolted shut. Man. Look at point 2. The Greeks laid siege to the city of Troy for how long? 10 years. I know you think I've been here a long time. We're about to start our 9th year this 3rd time. I hadn't even made 10 years yet. Y'all are going, ooh, that's a long time. 10 years, folks. 10 years they fought against that city. 10 years they brought their military. 10 years they fired their weapons at that wall. 10 years and they never penetrated the city of Troy. Isn't that unbelievable? Unbelievable. They devised a plan. Build a wooden horse. Watch this. As a trophy for who? For the Trojans. We give up. We're defeated. We can't win. So they build this massive horse. And they leave it outside the city walls. For who? For the Trojans, for the city in Troy. Troy's standing there on their walls. They look out and guess what they see? A horse. Wow, look at that horse. But that's not all they saw. They saw the enemy get in their boats and begin to sail away from the city. I want you to think about this. 10 years and they haven't destroyed Troy. Is Troy a strong city? Strong city. Unbelievable. Point number 3 there. 4. They put about 40 warriors inside the horse. 40. That's not very many, is it? Not a big one at all. In the late hours, they watch the enemy leave. They go out, they retrieve the horse, they bring it into the city, shut the gates. In the late hours of the night, those 40 men exit the horse, open the city gates, and guess what? The enemy has returned from the sea, enter into the city, and overthrow it in a night. One night. Unbelievable, is it not? It is to me. You fight 10 years against a city, and you don't have the power and you don't have the might to overcome it, and one wise decision, that's all it was, one wise decision, one wise plan, and you overthrow a city in a night. Wisdom is greater than what? Than weapons. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Now look at point C again. How many times has an enemy planned, accumulated resources, spent countless hours in planning, but were foiled because of the wisdom of the opposition, countered them by moving to another position away from the field or flanking them and winning the battle? Go back and study some of the battles of the Civil War. It's amazing, you know it? The military wisdom that was there. Sometimes it had nothing to do with the power of the forces. It was the wisdom of the leaders making decisions and maneuvering those armies that won the battle. It's amazing. But look how he ends the verse. But one sinner destroyeth what? Much good. How many? Just one sinner. That's all it takes. That can destroy much good. One sinner in a home can destroy the home, can it? I just find it interesting how easy it was for Adam and Eve to destroy their home, don't you? They had the perfect living conditions, didn't they? There was no evil, as far as they weren't sinners. They had a beautiful home, everything they needed. God's presence was right there. Their eyes were innocent. They were still naked, were they not? Just as innocent as they could be. One sin destroyed it all. And the woman saw that the tree was good for food and pleasant to the eyes, and a tree to be desired to make one wise. She ate of the fruit thereof, and to give also to her husband, and he did eat. Man, one sin can destroy a home, can it? Can the sin of adultery destroy a home? Oh, yes. And it's not pretty, is it? And it's not just the man and the wife in that home who are destroyed. Children are harmed in that adulterous situation. Friends and family, now they have to do what? Now they have to choose which side they're going to belong to. Who they're going to side with, who is right and who is wrong. Friends who used to be friends forever are now enemies of one another. One sin can destroy a home. One sinner can destroy much good in a church. Can he? Hey. Because how something was handled in the church? Oh, gotcha. Oh, absolutely. Just one sin can destroy much good, can it? Doesn't take a lot to do that. The fornicator at Corinth, just one fornicator in there, wasn't there? But if his presence were allowed to stay in that church, what did Paul say? A little leaven what? Leaveneth the whole lump. One sinner in that congregation could cause sin to spread throughout the entirety of that church. One disgruntled member can ruin a congregation, can he? Just one. One false teacher enter into a congregation and start preaching his error, and individuals start believing that error, and all of a sudden that church gets ripped asunder because of a false teacher. Turn over to Romans, the 17th chapter. The 16th chapter. Very last chapter of Romans. I don't know why I'm having such trouble with this stuff. That's why. If I get in Romans, it'd help, wouldn't it? I don't ever use this Bible. Here we go. Romans 16, 17 and 18. Now I beseech you, brethren, mark them which what? Cause divisions and offenses contrary to the doctrine which ye have learned, and what? And avoid them. Isn't that something? Paul says, I need you to do two things to false teachers. I need you to mark them. That little word mark means to set your eyes on them. That's what it means. You set your eyes on those individuals. Okay? In order to set my eyes on them, I have to know who they are, don't I? If I don't know who they are, I won't know how to set my eyes. And then he says, don't just set your eyes on them. He says also do what? You avoid them. Because they cause divisions and offenses what? Contrary to the doctrine. He goes on to say in the very next verse, for they that are such serve not our Lord Jesus Christ, but their own bellies, and by their words and fair speeches deceive the hearts of who? Of the simple. Man. One false doctrine. That's all it takes. One sinner can destroy much good in a community. One sinner can destroy much good in a nation. I put down Achan. Everybody remember Achan? Children of Israel crossed the Jordan River. And the first city they took was what? Jericho. Great victory, was it not? The next was just a little bitty city. A little city of Ai. You didn't need your whole army to go out and fight against it. And guess what happened? They lost. Why? Why did Israel lose? Here they had God on their side. God had just destroyed the city of Jericho and not a shot fired. And now they lose because Achan took of what? He took of the accursed thing, the Bible says, didn't he? 3 things he took out of the city of Jericho. Everything in that city belonged to God. It was the first fruits, and it went to God. And he took silver, gold, and a Babylonian garment. And because of that, Israel lost that battle. Unbelievable, isn't it? One sin can harm a what? An entire nation. Nation. We need to be careful when our nation starts embracing sinful things, folks. You know it? Sometimes we as Christians, we have a hard time opposing the sinful things that our nation embraces. But one sin can destroy a nation. All righty, very good. We got through 3 verses. We'll start chapter 10 next week.